Major news on a story we've been covering here for the last couple weeks, and potentially major new stakes for the ex-president in DOJ's criminal investigation into his mishandling of sensitive classified documents. NBC News has learned Trump loyalist Kash Patel is expected to testify soon before a federal grand jury about the documents and Trump's public claims, which Patel has repeated and backed, that he declassified the records he took with him to Mar-a-Lago. The New York Times is reporting that the U.S. Justice Department offered Kash Patel immunity after a federal judge ruled that would be the only way to force him to testify under oath. The New York Times reports this. The decision effectively cleared the way for his testimony and makes moot his Fifth Amendment and self-incrimination claims. And it now makes Patel the steadfast, loyal Trump confidant whom Trump handpicked to deal with the documents and the National Archives, one of the biggest witnesses with potentially incriminating information in a criminal probe inching closer and closer to the ex-president. Joining us now, one of the reporters with the byline on that reporting, Mike Schmidt, Washington correspondent for the New York Times, also an MSNBC national security contributor. Mary's still with us. Mike, tell us what you and your colleagues are reporting.
Well, the question of what was going to happen with Kash Patel has sort of been out there for a few weeks. The Justice Department had sort of entered the phase where they were concentrating on these recalcitrant witnesses, these witnesses who had not cooperated or had not provided, accounts that they thought were accurate. And in the case of Patel, last month, he had taken the Fifth Amendment before a grand jury about a range of questions that prosecutors wanted to ask him about the documents, about how the documents were handled. Patel has been the person who's out there in the aftermath of the raid, saying that Trump declassified all these documents. Now, if you're the government and you're trying to get to the bottom of everything that occurred here and know, all the facts as possible, you want to talk to him about that, because if the documents were declassified, it would legally change several things around, potentially around this issue. So they wanted to talk to him about that. He refused to do it. A judge refused to go along with the government's efforts to compel him. Now he has received immunity, so he'll have to go before the grand jury and testify and answer all of prosecutors' questions. Now, what remains to be seen is what type of witness he is. Is he someone who just barely answers the questions and gives yes or no answers, or actually provides lengthy, robust responses? And witnesses can take different postures.
I understand Patel's importance to DOJ and that there's naturally and inherently tense relationship between someone like Patel and DOJ, but wouldn't Patel have debriefed Trump's lawyers? I mean, they never alleged that anything was declassified in any of the various jurisdictions in which they've filed legal filings.
Well, it depends how, Trump's legal team is operating and if they've basically done an investigation themselves to figure out what all the facts are. So, we don't know if that has happened. What we do know is that no one has substantiated the claim that Trump declassified these. This is something that has been repeated by Trump allies. Trump himself alluded to it, but there's been no evidence to come out that it actually happened. And Trump's lawyers could have, in the special master fight, this fight with the Justice Department about what materials can be kept from the raid, they could have made this assertion and said, yes, these documents were classified and here are the receipts, or here's how it went down. That has not happened. So the claim has remained unsubstantiated. And the question is that why was Patel saying that? Was this simply just typical Trump lying? Was it part of an effort to throw sand in the gears of the investigation? We don't know. But if you're the prosecutors, you want to talk to Patel.
Patel was on a podcast, Mary, we played it on the show yesterday, saying, I'm one with the boss forever. Does DOJ care? If you get immunity, are you expected to act a certain way, or is it just really limited to what you're going to get from a witness in front of the grand jury?
So, the Department of Justice relies on cooperators in many, many cases, criminal cases, and it does offer use immunity, sometimes even to people who they, believe have committed crimes, because that person, if they're important enough and can provide the evidence that the government thinks is even more important to go after a bigger fish, if
like
you
mob
will.
prosecutions.
Yeah, exactly.
All your witnesses are criminals.
Exactly. So they're used to dealing with some characters who aren't always that credible and who are criminals, frankly. And so here, I think what they're thinking about is, he is so central to this. He's been so close to Trump on this issue. Mm-hmm. He's been out there spreading this, story about declassification. And so they want to talk to him and they want to get the real deal. Now, I want to make sure people understand what use immunity is, because that doesn't mean Kash Patel cannot be prosecuted for anything related to the mishandling of classified information or the obstruction of justice. It means the prosecution can't use what he says in the grand jury or anything derived directly from that, right? So if there were other evidence of his criminal culpability, it doesn't mean he's definitely
immune from that.
Yeah, exactly. It also doesn't immunize him from lying, from committing perjury. So if he were to go into that grand jury and stick with his story about declassification, and later it could be proven otherwise, he could still be charged with perjury for that. So there's limitations on what it does. But I think the department here has just made this assessment that they need to hear what he has to say, and by giving him that immunity, and they probably are putting pressure on him. He probably feels the heat of a potential criminal charges if he's part of this, and so. I think they just made that assessment that it was worth it here. I think one of the things that doesn't get talked about very much with respect to Kash Patel, he used to be in the National Security Division.
Right.
He worked for me when I was the acting assistant attorney general. He was a counterterrorism prosecutor.
Was he
knows about
normal?
classification. There were some issues. But I had no reason to question his sort of, loyalty to the rule of law and to following the facts and law where they lead. Like, I did not think he was somebody who would make things up. But he also well knows what declassification is. And though he's right that the president does have authority to declassify, presidents don't do that with a wave of their hand over
or mind wave
or mind. You would have to make a decision, document by document, material by material, that it is no longer a danger to national security if it were to be revealed. And that clearly did not happen.